Welcome once again to the J Lowe Artist YouTube channel. Thanks for joining me on this artistic adventure. Today we'll be working with ink, pen and ink. So have your kneaded eraser, a number 2 or an HB pencil handy, and any type of ink that you would like to use. But make sure that it's archival, that it's permanent, that it's black, and a smooth ink. And let's start doing some ink drawing. Thanks for being here this morning, and thanks for being willing to do this ink drawing. I know that ink isn't easy, but hopefully with these little tutorials that I've been giving you, that you're finding out that it's a little easier than you thought it was. First thing we're going to do is we're going to do our layout. We're going to figure out where everything goes, so we're going to use our number 2 pencil. Remember, everything gets erased with that. And we're going to use the side of our pencil. So the first thing we want to do is we want to relate our object to our paper. And since his trident there is very, very vertical, it relates very well to the edge of this paper. So you may want to say to yourself, okay, I'm going to put that right there. Just want to throw that in and just put a little line there and say that's where I want it to go. And you notice my line isn't very straight. That's okay. And it goes up almost to the top. So you want to leave yourself a little bit of breathing space up at the top. And then if you look at the bottom of the U shape of the trident, it's level with his chin. So if you kind of come over here and you say, okay, if that's where I want my trident, his chin is going to be right there. So you can make a little mark there and say that's about where his chin goes. Almost to the top, the point is almost to the top of his head. It's a little higher. So if you just go for the top of where your trident wants to be, and just come down a little bit, make a little mark, that is how big your head's going to be. Now, you can adjust that too. You can say, well, I want that little trident to be a little bit bigger, so you can adjust it a little bit. But overall, and just start out with an oval for his head. A lot of people always say, oh, I can't draw people. All I draw is stick figures. Well, that's how you start. So you start with the oval for the head. That just tells you how big it's going to be. And then you leave yourself a little bit of space for the neck. And then there's the shoulders. And the shoulders aren't straight across. They're at a slight angle because he's kind of turning away from you a little bit. And if you go down about the length of his head, so if you take his head and you come down the length of his head, that's about where his hand is. So you can kind of figure out, okay, the hand is going to be right there. And the hand is about half of his head. So if you look at the head and you take about half of that, that's about as big as that hand is going to be. This is called proportioning, where you compare everything. And oftentimes, when we're doing humans, we're comparing everything to the size of the head. So there's his hand. And if you come down, if you measure his head, so you can use your pencil, or you can use your fingers like this. This is what I like to do. And you come down one more head. So if you go from the bottom of his head, one head, and you make a little mark there, that's where his pectoralis major is. That's where his chest is. And if you think about that, if you go level across from there, that's about where his hand is. And so as an artist is drawing, he's looking at all this stuff. He's thinking about all this stuff. It's just kind of happening for him. And after a while, he doesn't even have to think about it. It just happens. You might want to move that over just a little bit. There we go. And if you go down another head, so if you measure his head and you go from his pectoralis major down, that's about where the center of his belly button is. And the belly button is in the middle of your third abdominal muscles. So you have 1, 2, 3, right there's the belly button. And so you can kind of figure out where those abdominal muscles are going to be. Isn't that crazy? And you just divide that up into thirds and you got it. Now, there's a lot of water that's splashing in there, and a lot of that would just leave out. You just don't even touch it because it's light. You know, water, when it's agitated, becomes white. It picks up all the light, and since, you know, all the light waves, all those colors in the light waves become white when they put together, water becomes white. Oh, my drawing? Oh, I am so sorry. I'm going to have to draw a little heavier. I am so used to drawing lightly that thank you for that. I'm sorry. I'll draw a little heavier. You know, I know that, but I am such the habit of drawing light that it's hard for me. Look at the muscles, like his deltoid muscle, that shoulder muscle. It's very rounded, very oval. It's actually more of a teardrop shape, but. And then his biceps and triceps, you could lump those all together in kind of a little oval. Remember, we're just doing simple shapes. Simple shapes. Everything is very simple. At least we're trying to make it simple. How about that? It gets more complex as it goes, but now let me ask you a question. When you look at a picture like this, where does your eye rest? Where is your emphasis? Does it rest on his funny gauntlets? Does it rest on his trident? Where does your... Okay, up in this area here. Do you ever go up into the head and kind of look at the eyes, kind of rest in there, and then kind of go back and look around at things? Usually, and I think we're trained a little bit to look at the eye. And so our gaze usually goes to the face. I am not going to worry too much about all the stuff that's down here. His hand is in a fist, and so you just block it in with a kind of a little rectangle. The rest of this is covered up with water, so we're just going to leave that out. His hand over here is also kind of a rectangle. You do want to block it in and just keep those fingers together. When you're doing hands to begin with, think of them like mittens. You know, you've got a thumb, and then the other fingers just kind of mitten together. Hopefully that makes sense. You can divide those fingers up a little bit later. But we want to concentrate on the head. So once we've got our body, our shape, and everything where we want it to go, then we concentrate on the face. And this is where we want to spend a little extra time. If you can nail the face, if you can get that face to look pretty good, the rest of it's going to fall into place. So one thing you may not know is that when you're dividing up the face, and I'm going to zoom in, have you got the body pretty much where you want it? We can work on it a little bit later, but just stick figure, kind of get it in. Remember, everything gets erased, and so you just want it kind of where it's supposed to go, and then we can figure out the rest of it from there. If you were to divide from the chin, and the chin is hidden a little bit by this hair, by his beard, but if you go from the chin to the cranium, which is also hidden by some hair, so up in here, if you come down just a little bit, the top of the cranium's about right in there. If you divide that space up, your eyes are right about smack dab in the middle of your head. So if you look at that space you've designed, and you go right smack dab in the middle, that's about where the eyes are. And you can use your pencil to measure. You can kind of do something like this. Try to get your pencil to measure. You can use a ruler. I don't know if you've ever seen stereotypical artists that put out their thumb like this. What they're doing is they're measuring things using these little lines in their thumbs to help figure out how big something is. So that's why they put that thumb out there. That's what they're doing, proportioning. So I just put a little line there to say this is where the eyes go. And if you divide that space between the eyes and the chin directly in half, that is where this little divot in your, just below your nose, that's where that is. So if you come up a little bit and you just put a little shadow there. Sometimes I'll do a little kind of a V shape or a little U shape for the shadow under the nose. And then you divide between the nose and the chin, and that's about where the mouth goes, give or take a little bit. And the bottom lip is just a little shadow. Can you see the face already starting? Now, I get this a lot. People will say, well, all I do is cartoons. Well, there's a cartoon right there. Cartoons are just simplified. So if you learn how to draw things realistically, your cartoons are going to get better because you just simplify them. I am going to, with my pencil, I'm going to put in his eyebrow because it's very distinctive. It's kind of curved right there. And a lot of people, if you like to draw or even like to read graphic novels or comic books, you know, they're using real people as references. I'm not really trying to get a lot of detail here, but oddly enough, you'll look at it and you think, oh, Mr. Lowe, you're putting in a lot of details. I'm really not. I'm just throwing in the shape of the eye. Now, here's something you may not know as well, is once you decide how big an eye is going to be, there is what the length of that eye right in the middle of those two eyes. And so sometimes what I'll do is I'll use my pencil and I'll just kind of look at that and I'll look at that and then I'll make a little mark here. That's where the other eye starts, and that's the length of the other eye. And that's how you get your eyes so that they're the same size. There's one eye length in between your eyes. And if you think about this, if you go straight down from the tear ducts, that's the length of your nose. So your eye and your nose are the same length. Now, everybody's off just a little bit, but overall, when you're comparing things, that's what you're thinking to yourself. Did you know that? That's called proportioning. And if you know the basic proportions, then you know what to anticipate, and you can figure that all out. If you come down about 1/6 of the head, so if you come down, you divide this up into sixes, about 1/6 or so is where the hair is going to start. So I can come up in here and I can put just a little line, a little mark, and say that's about where that hair goes. You know, it's going to start. And it goes up above the head a little bit because it kind of sticks up above it. And I can just block in where that hair goes. Now, a male's neck usually comes right off his chin. So if you've got your chin there, that's about where your neck goes. He's got kind of a collar thing on, and so you can't see that other side. It kind of comes up there. But that's basically it. Now, if you want your person to look a little more heroic, let's say you're doing Marvel comic style drawing, the head is a little bit smaller than it normally is. That makes the body a little bit bigger. It gives it a little more, makes them a little more heroic looking. I'm going to show you some techniques about doing eyes. We don't have to deal with ears here because his hair is covering all that. That's kind of nice. I'm just going to block in where his hair goes. Not that I'm going to show you how to do the hair. Hair is easy. Now, we don't necessarily need to erase all this stuff, but I'm just going to erase it so that you can see what's going to happen with this. You can, if you want to, block in where his beard and all that goes too. During the late Renaissance, the time of Shakespeare, men that didn't have beards were laughed at. It's like if you couldn't grow a beard, you were laughed at. So I'm going to zoom back out on him and just make sure that you get all the proportions the way you want them. Block it in the way you want to. Block it in. I'm going to stay on the head, though, here because I want to show you some techniques about drawing things that I do with just about every person I draw. Oddly enough, you're looking at it thinking, oh, gosh, there's all these details like in his nose. I didn't put those in. You're doing that in your own mind. That's the beauty of this type of drawing, is you allow the viewer a little imagination. Makes it a little more interesting. Now, we can adjust this up or down a little bit. We've got some space to do that. I do want to show you something, though, and I'm just going to, this is a piece of tracing paper. I just want to show you how to draw, and we drew an eye together, but that's how I start all my eyes. You kind of start with that upper eyelid. And then the iris is just a circle or a bracket, and you never see all of the iris. Sometimes you just see a little portion of it. And this way, he's looking off to the side. And so we're just going to see a little portion. We do, however, know that he's got a shine in his eye. So remember drawing that eye? We drew that little Pac-Man shape. That's all you need. It's just a little half circle and leave that dot out. So I'm going to draw this larger so you can see what I'm doing. So you start out with the arch. Then here's the iris. You can do a little dot in here. He's got his tear duct that's about right in there. Then there's a little shine in the eye. And so instead of drawing the pupil, you just do a little half circle. There's the pupil. And then you do some little dots or dashes, whatever you feel like you need. Little dots or dashes in there. Now, if you're doing a female eye, you're going to do some eyelashes. If you're doing a male eye like this, you just do a darker shape there. Yes, he's got eyelashes. I guess you could do a little bit there, but you don't want to accentuate those eyelashes. You do want it a little darker up there. And remember, the eye is never white, and so sometimes you can just hatch through it. So that you have a little bit of darkness there, just a little bit. He has some reflected light under here, and you can see some of that eyelid, just a little bit. And then that shadow that's under his eye, just hatch through it. A little hatch, 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 hatch. So that's what I'm going to be drawing, just like that. And I'm going to do that on both eyes. This other eye is a little bit lighter because the light source is coming from our right. So there's not going to be as much line in there, but it's the same concept. And the eyebrows, remember when we were drawing animals, we said all the hair kind of moves up this way. And if you look at eyebrows, they're all moving up that way as they go away from the head. And same thing on the other side, they're going to move up the other way. And so as I'm doing eyebrows, I'm going to do those little lines, little feathered lines up and over in the direction that they flow. Does that make sense? So that's what I'm going to do. But remember, we're trying to just put in the minimum amount of line. We don't want to put too much in. We can always come back in and add. So I'm just going to add some line there. Here's his eyebrows. There's his iris, his pupil, a couple little dots in there, and you got it. Add a little bit of thickness to the eyelash up on top. Just a little bit. And maybe a little bit on the bottom. Dots and dashes. Don't do too much. Can always come back in and add more. The shadow going down the nose. Don't draw a line. Use these little hatched lines or dots. Here's the shadow going down the nose. Here's the shadow under the eye. So I went right through the eye and did a little shadow under the eye. That adds a little darkness to that. Dots and dashes, whatever you think you need. Here's the shadow down that head, just little hatched lines. And barely touch your paper. Again, this is something that you've got to practice. It doesn't come natural. I'm going to do the shadow under the nose. So I'm going to start with the nostril. It's just this little Nike swoosh that goes into a V shape. And then you can use dots and dashes to get that shadow under his nose. Cast shadow, just little dots and dashes. And that's about it. You really don't want to do a lot there. Now, some of these things add character. Like the little scar on this side, I'll just leave that out. Or maybe this little eyebrow indent that's right there. A couple dots and dashes and you got it. Don't do too much. Like I say, you can always come back in later and add more, which we probably will need to. As far as lips go, this top lip is shadowed, so you can go in and you can do just little hatched lines for the top lip. And the bottom lip has a little shadow underneath, and it's accentuated by the hair. So if you do that little feathered line, you got it. And here's the hair of his beard. Just do it in the darkest areas. So if it's fairly light, just less line or no line. And just dots and dashes, whatever you think you need. I'm going to go back into his lip because usually right at the very base of the lip, especially on the corners, it's going to go darker. So I can darken that in with some little dots and dashes. And here's the rest of that beard.
the mustache, the beard. Here's his other eye. I'm going to just throw that in. I'm going to start with the eyebrow. And that little scar that's there, we're going to leave that out. Those little dots and dashes. Any kind of wrinkles under his eye, dots. Don't try to put a line there. It'll make him look old. Keep it simple. A few little dots and dashes and you got it. Here, where his little smile line is there, that cheek line, just a couple little dots and dashes. If you put a line there, it's going to make him look old. And the rest of that hair. Remember, don't draw a line around anything. Those edges are going to take care of themselves. Any of those little hatchy lines that you put in there, if you think, oh, I need to go darker, add more line. And technically, that's about it. If you want to put like little eyebrow lines up in the brow there, you could, but just look at the shape of what you got and do little hatch lines through those shapes. Dots and dashes. You got to be careful with those, though. You don't want too many. And when you start doing hair, hair is a piece of cake. Don't think of hair like spaghetti. Think of it as just shapes of dark and light. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick out some of these shapes. I'm going to start with this hair over here, and I can see that little shape of darkness. I'm just going to scribble that in. If you can go the direction that the hair flows, it'll give it more of a feeling of hair, but it's really just a shape of darkness. And then you just kind of combine those little shapes of darkness together. And again, if you can go in the direction that the hair flows, you're going to be okay. And it's just scribble it in. Don't draw a line to say this is where his hair starts. Just use the little lines in the direction the hair flows, and it'll look like hair. And you'll notice, too, that I don't always go in the same direction. Sometimes I flip up, sometimes I flip down, because that's how hair goes. And the cool thing is, if it's not in the right place, you can always add more until it is. If you drew a line, that line's going to be there forever, and you'll never get rid of it. It'll plague you forever. So just like we did with our sphere and anything else, We get our shape, and then we clean it up a little bit. I got to clean up his nose a little bit. It's a little broad. Just going to go in and a couple little dots and dashes. Sometimes that's all it takes is a dot. With that done, you can breathe a sigh of relief because you're like, ah, oh, good, the head's done. Or at least close to being done. Sometimes when you're doing hair, if there's some light hair, you can just put a little line there and then finish it off. And like, how do I explain this? If I start here and then I end that and then I kind of finish it off over here, everybody understands that that hair is together. And if you don't, if you still look at it and you think, well, I need a little dot or something in between, you can put a little dots in between. But that little hair kind of continues on. But it makes it look nice and light. Like I say, we can always come back into this and add more, which I always need to. It almost looks like I've drawn a line around his head, but I really haven't. Just leave it out. Okay, did you breathe a sigh of relief? Like, oh, glad that head's done. Because that's it. That's the important part. Once that head's done, then we can concentrate on the rest of it. And the rest of him is going to go fairly quickly because we can leave a lot of stuff out. All the shines and everything on his outfit are just gone. Leave them out. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick out, I'm doing his torso now. I'm just going to pick out the darkest areas and kind of throw those in with these little zigzaggy textures. Again, you can leave it out. There's just a ton that you can leave out. You can use little dots, you can use dashes, but just pick out the darkest areas and do the shapes of the darkness you see. In other words, you're not trying to draw a muscle, you're trying to draw just the shadows underneath or along. The less that you see of it, the less you draw. And it's kind of like drawing a tree. You know, you just pick out the darks and you draw those darks. If you want this texture that's in there, you can do that with dots or dashes. I'm going to do it with these little U shapes, just ever so lightly. And you don't need them everywhere. It's kind of like drawing brick in a building. Everybody knows they're there. They know what they are. We can always come back in later and add more. And if it's shiny, just don't add anything in it. Just leave it out. Like this muscle across his deltoid over here is so shiny. I'm just going to leave that shape out because there's a little shine across it. A couple little dots and dashes, and you got it. And if I got rid of my graphite, which I like doing, everybody knows that arm is there. They know it's shiny. And if you go, I need a little bit more, just keep adding a few little dots and dashes until it's about what you want it to be. Like I say, you can always add more later on. And if it's really dark, you just can hatch through it. Like right here, I'm just going to hatch through this. Hatch, 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 hatch. Same thing with like his bicep here. Add a little line here. It's very shiny here. Everybody knows it's curved. You pick it up right there. Your eye will make that connection that is all together. And then you can experiment with the texture. What do you need? A couple little U shapes or little. I'm not really trying to even go into a pattern here. So at this point, I want to go as fast as I can because number one is we've done the important part. All this stuff here, you just do, it's all a big texture anyway. So I just kind of want to just do some hatched lines and just go as fast as I can because I know I've got to come back into it. But I want to get rid of my graphite. And just in the back of your mind, hopefully you're thinking, I can't draw a line around things. Okay, I know that's what you're used to doing. That doesn't work anymore. When you're ready to do like his gauntlets, just pick out the shapes of the darkness and just throw in those shapes. Don't worry about what it is. Even the fingers, don't think about them as fingers. They're just shapes of things. You could, here's the thumb tip. I'm just going to do the little shadow under the thumb tip, and the thumb is done. If you think about it, you can get rid of that graphite. That's it. Nothing left to do there. Apparently there are little plates in his gauntlets, and that's what you're seeing there. Those little plates, you can kind of round them. This is yeah, I built enough armor that I know what this is. This is actually called fish scale armor, because they use little scales on top of each other. It's very apropos for Aquaman, isn't it? In the Middle Ages, people on ships used to wear armor. They fought on ships kind of like they fight on land. And they kind of found out that if you could just knock the other guy off the edge, his armor is going to drag him down. There was a big ship battle fought in the 14th century, 1350s, called the Battle of Sluis. And it was fought off the coast of Flanders, off the coast of modern day Netherlands. And in the 15th century, the shoreline changed. And now you could go out and wander about a mile in from the shore and find all this stuff that fell off these ships, including people and armor and everything. That was during the 100 Years' War.
Really?
Yeah, between England and France. So I'm not even thinking fingers, because it's in a gauntlet anyway. I mean, what do you see? You don't see hardly anything. Just throw it in. Here's his staff, and I'm not using a ruler, although you could, but just use little dots and dashes, and then you don't have to be straight. If you wanted to, I guess you could put a piece of paper over there. But just a couple little dots and dashes, and you got it. Here's these little keons. They used to have a spear called a boar spear that would have those on there.
Do you know what a pole arm is?
Oh, yeah.
It's quite cool.
Do you know why it's spelled P-O-L-L instead of P-O-L-E?
No.
Because the pole is the top of the horse's head. And the idea is that you get over the horse's head to get the man who rides it.
No, like a pole arm, like an actual pole arm,
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's spelled P-O-L-L because that's the top of the horse's head. It's not because it's on a pole.
No.
One of my favorite pole arms is called a halberd.
Really?
Yep. It has all sorts of little nasty points that do their job,
They do their job well.
or can do their job if you know what you're doing. So again, I'm getting lost in the details. I'm just going to have to block these out. Just go through it as fast as you can. And like I say, you can always come back in and do other things. And notice there's not a specific, I'm just scribbling. This is like controlled scribbling. I get that all the time. People will say, oh, you look like you're just scribbling. I am. All I want to do is get the shape of the whatever that is. And remember, if you can't see it, if it's too light, just leave it out. Guess his little weapon's kind of important, so we'll put that in there. I'm just doing the little U shapes in the form of fish scale. They kind of stack up like brick, one offset over the other, but just in the darkest shadowy areas. If it's in the light, don't worry about it. Kind of an interesting looking belt. All that stuff that's covered up by the water, just draw what you see and leave the rest out. We get the idea that it's covered up. So you think of fish scales kind of like brick, where everyone kind of overlaps each other. That's kind of all it is. And we could do a whole lot more with this, but I always promise you about an hour. So if you could spend an hour of time with me every day, it's kind of like piano lessons, I guess. You gotta have a little bit of time to do your piano lessons, and then you got it. You'll be a concert pianist in no time. If you want it, it's there for you. I truly, honestly believe that anything you want, if you want it bad enough, it's there for you. So instead of just drawing in those little shapes, you can just block them in with your scratching. So as I go through and there's a shape there, there's a shape there, there's a shape there. One below it, one below it, one below it. So the idea is just to give it the texture that you can see, and you may not need much in there, just a couple little hatch lines. There is a lot of stuff here. But you really do want to just simplify it a little bit as best you can. I told you we had to go back into the head. Once you start getting the body done and you look at the head and you're like, okay, we need a little bit more in there. Well, there is a lot more that you could do on this. But hopefully you've had a little bit of fun with this. Learned some things, especially about drawing people. And a little bit of practice in, that's always good. A bunch of water that's kind of splashing up in here. If you wanted to do some of that water, you just do in between areas. I think I've got a tiger that's running through water, and you can see kind of how that's done. You just leave it out. This is that water hits the light and it gets agitated, it picks up all those light waves, and it's white. And I promise you, the more you practice this, the better you're going to get in all forms of design and drawing. Ink is a very viable and very important method of drawing, medium. And you're just going to learn a lot by drawing with ink. You just learn a ton. One thing that you learn, I think, is just not to be afraid of it. You know, fear is one of those things that we have to overcome. It's a totally useless emotion. It just keeps us from doing good things. So many times people are afraid to show anybody their artwork, afraid they'll laugh at it. Somehow we have to get over that fear. Because, number one, we're just trying to visualize our world and create something that's never been done before. You know, I'm sure that people laughed at Jules Verne when he did 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and Journey to the Moon, Journey to the Center of the Earth. But, you know, the guy is still making money and he's been dead 100 years. So, you know, let him laugh. You know, Walt Disney made all these movies out of his stuff because it was creative and it was inventive and it was fun. So as long as you're having fun, I think you're going to be just fine. You know what? In the end, the only person you're trying to please when doing art is yourself. And if somebody else looks at it and enjoys it or gets ideas from it, that's a good thing too. Would you like to be the guy that had to put all those little latex fish scales on there? Oh, I think it would be fun. You know, I look at people who do cosplay and they create all sorts of costumes and things, and I think, wow, that is awesome. I get asked all the time, you know, what do you do, you know, with your art? I'm going to have to do a little video on what do I do with my art. Maybe we'll talk about, now that you're learning how to draw, what do you do now? Well, thanks for drawing with me. Hopefully, art has made your life a little bit nicer, given you a little bit of a diversion from, you know, life, whatever's going on. Sometimes it's good to have just a little outlet, something that you can go to say, I just need something different to do. And I hope I've helped out there somewhere. It's all about making the world a better place. If I've done something for you like that, I'm so glad, because you deserve it. Good place for signatures right there. And I hope you have a lovely day.